Hi, I'm Timothy TEW, coming to you from the French attic located over my gallery. This is the first video in a series of brief videos about artworks in my private collection. I thought people would perhaps be interested to know about how I buy, why I buy, and perhaps you can glean some information about collecting that way. Most of the pieces, or a large number of the pieces in my collection, are by artists that I represent or have shown over the years. But there are other works that fall outside of that, totally outside of that, and they would fall into a category of what we would generally call old masters, works from say, the 16th century through the 19th century. When I got into the art business, my love of art or my knowledge of art really spanned from the Impressionist through to the abstract expressionist. And I spent a great deal of my early career learning more about these artists, exploring them in depth as I got to visit great museums and learn from artists and from my collecting. And I spent a great deal of time trying to figure out contemporary art because there was a lot of it that really confused me. I was not a person who understood or appreciated conceptual art. I am driven by imagery and I love painting. Uh, Within that, of course, I love sculpture and drawing, but I have this love of imagery. So at one point, about 15 years ago or something like that, my taste began to take a turn. And as is the case with a collector, you can't control where your eye goes, and it's often very surprising where your eye will carry you. It's a natural progression, I feel. And I began to explore art of the earlier 19th century, and then this led to discovering art of the 18th, 17th, and 16th century. And one of my favorite periods of art is late 16th and early 17th century Dutch art, and actually Northern European art. I love some of the sculptures, the wood sculptures from like the 15th and 16th century. They're astonishing to me. So today I want to talk to you about a painting that is what we could call an old master. And before I explain a bit about it, let me just say that uh, when you buy, hopefully you're being led by your eye, by a feeling you have for a painting. And I saw this painting at a show in Paris. It was not one of the highest level shows. It was one where I sensed that I could perhaps buy something if I found something I loved. And I walked in and I just fell immediately in love with this painting. I couldn't believe, actually, I could not believe that the quality of painting I was seeing was there. And even though it was expensive for me, it was not expensive in the big scheme of things. And I bought it, and kind of the rest is history. But I believe it is a painting by Louis-Leopold Boilly, is a painter of the Napoleonic era. He lived in Paris, and I'm going to show you some of his work so you get a sense of what was happening in painting at that time. Style was very narrow in these eras. You kind of conformed and to a certain perspective as an artist. So you made your mark with the individuality of fine points. Also, craft was really, really important. Today, craft is important to some people and it's not important to others. So we live in a time where it's kind of the Wild West in art, and that it's made for some amazing creations, but it also allows a lot of crap to get through and for people to get hoodwinked into thinking it's good, and I don't think it will be good in time, but I'm not going to go off on that right now. This is a little difficult because I'm going to have to turn the camera around and it's not the easiest, but I want to show you this book I have about Louis-Leopold Boilly so you get some sense of the kind of work he created and what kind of artist he is. So bear with me here. This is the book. It's The Art of Louis-Leopold Boilly, Modern Life in Napoleonic France. And I want you to notice the color. The range is subtle. It's not there's a lot of green and brown here, but it is just exquisite. The light in it. Look at the finesse of the figures, some of the faces. Also the dog. Look how beautifully drawn the dog is, and the kind of positioning and the elements that are in here. Okay. So since this was a painter of the Napoleonic era, he did these group scenes as well. And this is a scene of spectators outside the Palais Royal in Paris. It's 1796, so it's right after the start of the Revolution. Then we have this one, which is kind of amazing. It's a sculptor's studio. Again, we have a dog, a beautifully drawn dog. And you have the costuming. You begin to get a sense of the kind of quirky faces he used. They're caricature-like in type. Here, the coloration again. Boilly is known a great deal for his small, quirky portraits, these very small little portraits he did of individuals. He did hundreds of these. Generally, they don't smile, but you get a sense of how he treated the face, the finesse, the color, the kind of attitude. And then I want to show you this drawing. Let me see here. Here's a drawing that gives you a sense of how he treated the face. It is a drawing figure. And the costuming. I love the Napoleonic era for so many things. I love the costuming. I love the sense of color and the restrained glamour of the period. The furniture and design and the architecture are exquisite in this time period as well. This is a painting I really want you to look at because it is going to be similar to mine in many ways. And it's similar in that the landscape is important. It tells us something about this man. I don't know exactly what it tells us, but it's probably land he owns and has worked, and he's very attached to it. Especially with the the elements here where it shows he's cut down wood. It looks like he's made a bridge. He could be an architect. Notice the arrangement of the elements over in the lower right-hand corner, and look at the costuming, and also look at his kind of quirky face. The way his hair is done, and the shoes. Now, I'm not saying that I'm red in the face from bending over. I'm not saying that these elements alone can tell us, well, let me back up. You're going to see elements like this in my painting, and I'm not saying that those elements make it sure that this is a Boilly. But you begin to understand that artists have quirks. They have little things that they do that define who they are. And the painting behind me is the one I'm speaking of. This is a painting I bought in Paris, like I said earlier. And when I asked who it was, the woman I bought it from didn't know. But she said, if you can figure out where the landscape is, you would have some idea, because it's a painting of a French Napoleonic general. And it's probably, or it's almost certainly, a landscape where he won a decisive battle for Napoleon. One of the reasons we get that, first of all, he's wearing his uniform. He's with his groomsman, and I want you to look at how beautifully drawn the horse is. It's exquisite. Also, we've got another dog, which we've seen in these others. It's just exquisitely done. We've got his hat. And also we have the Napoleonic envelope here, the red envelope, which would have been used, or was used, to transmit messages from the general or his aides to his general, from Napoleon to his generals or to his top aides. And we see in the hand of the general, we see a paper, which is probably something coming from Napoleon, congratulating him perhaps on winning the victory. I want you to look at the man's face. You can begin to see how it shares qualities with the other Boillys that you've seen. Just the finesse of the drawing. Also, little details like the way the shoes are done. It takes such skill, and artists learn to do very subtle things to mark their work. They become like symbols of who they are. Now, as I said earlier, I said this is not, I cannot prove it as a Boilly. I would never stand here and say that it is a Boilly. It is, but what I get from this painting is the same feeling I get when I look at a Boilly. And I think that's really important for collectors to begin to understand, is that great artworks generate feelings, and a wonderful painting by Monet generates a certain response in us. And when you don't get that response, you're either looking, if you're sensitive to it, if you don't get that response, it's either a poor Monet or it isn't a Monet. And you will find that this, it becomes, for people that know and who have been exposed to art on a continual basis, this is how they, one of the ways they learn to identify wonderful art. Of course, to get something authenticated, it's a far different process. It's provenance, it's historical research, it can be research of pigments and that type of thing. So I'm not, your eye alone won't do it. In fact, the art market does not like that. But I want to really stress the importance of trusting your eye and what you feel when you look at a painting. But ultimately, what I want you to know is that if this were a Boilly, if it were authenticated as a Boilly, the price would be $150,000 to $200,000. It kind of depends on the market at the time. Because it's not, I was able to get it for a fraction of the price. And I mean a fraction. But I had to be able to recognize it as something extraordinary. And someone who was buying it as an investment to resell would have to do a lot of research and jump through a lot of hoops, and probably still end up not being able to authenticate it. So the real opportunity for someone like myself, who is driven by my aesthetic response, is that it isn't signed. I would never be able to live with something of this beauty, and I really want to stress to all collectors, anyone who loves art, is use your emotional response. See how it makes you feel. That, at the end of the day, is what art is about. That's my little lesson for today. I mean, it's taken me a long time to recognize that it's not about I've never been one about financial return in art, other than the fact that I'm in the art business, but I've never been one who's driven by investment. Because for me, the emotional power of an artwork trumps everything. So I hope you'll keep that in mind, and I hope you'll come visit us at the gallery soon, and you'll look back at Instagram for some of the future videos I'll be creating for works in my collection. Have a good day.